Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Dimitry Bivol versus Michael Eifert fight. So if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content, and I'll try my best to get it out there for you guys. I appreciate all the support in which I've had with it so far, and of course the link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one, and obviously this has been quite a while in the making to see Dmitry Bivol make his return, but the way it's happening and the fights that we're missing out on at the moment and the delay in general and a few other fighters that are kind of queuing up now to fight Dmitry Bivol, it's just a bit of a weird predicament in which we're in at the moment where we're not really getting too much of an explanation. I really, in general, just don't know what's happening with the light heavyweight division's two best fighters, especially recently, obviously in Bivol and Beterbiev. They fought two brilliant fights, both going to majority decision. Bivol winning the second one, he did win the second one, and on everybody's eyes, I feel like he won the second one, and of course he got the scorecards to become undisputed light heavyweight champion. He then, of course, vacated the WBC title to not fight David Benavidez, and at that point we were kind of then expecting him to go and get the trilogy going with Beterbiev, but instead I think he's had a back surgery. I'm pretty sure he's had a back surgery, so you can't go against anybody who's had an injury and had surgery and everything like that. I mean, he was pretty active before the surgery. This has been his first kind of major time at a world level that he's been less active, but then he's kind of been kept out for a while, probably recovering from that. Obviously, it's been over a year now. The last fight with Beterbiev was February of 2025. And instead of having a big return, obviously it's against a mandatory fighter here in Eifert, but instead of making it a big return, which is what it could have been for Matchroom, they really could have branded this as a big show, and we also could have answered a few questions from him being on a big show. I mean, this is still going to be on DAZN, so he might get asked a couple interesting questions, but we're not really getting the answers to the questions with him fighting out in Russia on a smaller show. Again, I understand how he might want to return back to his country, which he's more kind of seen as a home, I believe, and is wanting to go about his business in this fight in a bit more of a quiet fashion. I mean, he's never really been a big name fighter, in not a big name fighter. He's never really been a big talkative type of fighter in that way. Neither was Beterbiev, so I understand that, how he might want to just go about his business kind of in a bit more private, and I also understand that if he's wanting to fight in Russia, Matchroom probably won't want to get involved in a fight card in Russia, especially with everything going on in the world at the moment. But still, it's interesting. I wasn't sure that, I would have expected Matchroom to probably want to then push it, because of course Bivol is a star name and one of Matchroom's biggest names. If he is even still with Matchroom, I'm pretty sure he is, but again, that's an interesting kind of debate as to why it's happening out in Russia, and it's also getting zero promotion out in Russia. I mean, I'm recording this before Fight Week is technically started, but still, it's not getting any kind of push or promotion at the moment, really. So, if it gets pushed back, postponed, it wouldn't surprise me. That's kind of often the case with fights that don't get much of a promotion. I'm sure the Russian fans would turn out for Dmitry Bivol. Obviously, he's a star name and he hasn't fought in Russia for a long time, but again, I just feel like the boxing fans should know when a unified world champion is making his return in boxing, and that's just not really happening. Beterbiev's team have accused Bivol and his team of delaying the trilogy and trying to age him out of a trilogy. Beterbiev was 40 when he had the second fight with Bivol, so with him waiting a year, he'll be 41, and again, he's only going to be older, and if they start pushing it back and he has fights with, you know, the WBO ordering fighter in Callum Smith, who is now, like I say, being officially ordered by the WBO, which is interesting because Callum Smith obviously lost to Beterbiev and was meant to fight David Morrell, and obviously that didn't happen, and then Morrell lost. So for the WBO to order Smith as, of course, he's interim champion as mandatory is, expected, but it's interesting, kind of the timings around that, why that's happened. That might slow down the trilogy. And also we've got Benavidez, David Benavidez, of course, on a great run and just become a Cruiserweight world champion, but now he's trying to push to go back down to light heavyweight to fight Dmitry Bivol. The trilogy might not be there for Beterbiev. What would be ideal for me as a boxing fan would be to see Bivol Beterbiev free, and then see Benavidez either defend his belt like cruiserweight, or come back down to light heavyweight and defend his belt, or him go for unifications at cruiserweight, something like a Noah Mikhailian, or Opetaia fight probably won't happen. Unfortunately, it should happen, but it probably won't because now he's with Zuffa. So that's a fight there. Or like I said, just defend his title. He didn't have to have big fight after big fight after big fight, Benavidez, and you would then hope that Callum Smith can get kind of paid to be comfortable enough to just wait around, and like I say, paid to avoid the mandatory, or to actually take a fight himself. Because again, I just don't feel like Callum Smith should be getting a title shot straight away. I mean, he's got some good wins and he's on a bit of a better run post his loss to Beterbiev, but when you've got the likes of Beterbiev and Beterbiev, when you've got the likes of Beterbiev and Benavidez in line for a title shot, Smith isn't as big of a name. Obviously, he's still a big name. He's a bigger name than Eifert for sure. But again, I just feel like that should be the case, where it should kind of go in that order if it was an ideal world, really. Obviously, at his best, Bivol is one of the best fighters in the world. But is he still going to be the same after kind of the wars of fights that were the two with Beterbiev? I don't feel like he took tremendous amounts of damage, but they were still highly, well fought, high intensity fights. So you would imagine he still took a decent amount of damage. And of course, the time out with injury, and with him only really getting a bit older. He's not that old, but still getting a bit older, and being up against a bit of an unknown challenger, really, in Eifert. Again, is it, or could it play a bit of a factor? Again, he also might be underestimating Eifert as a challenger as well. Again, we never really know. The IBF, again, have had their way by making this fight be forced against and kind of over any other mandatory. The IBF are always the first ones to kind of order their mandatory, especially when a fight becomes undisputed. We saw it with Canelo, we saw it with Alexander Usyk, we saw it with, now we saw it with Dimitry Bivol again. It seems to be the case. Actually, no, I think, well, with the WBC, we're quick to order this one, but the IBF just seem to always get their way where they actually end up making the fights happen, which is interesting. But I don't really get how Eifert's been made mandatory. Again, you have to just look at the fact that he has been IBF Intercontinental Champion, and that just seems to mean so much to the IBF, where if you fight for that belt, no matter who you're fighting against, even though the level of opposition really isn't very good, as long as you're fighting for one of their belts, they would just instantly put you in a good spot and instantly try and force you to then become a mandatory challenger to get a shot at the title, even if you don't really deserve it. He has got a win, which is good, against Jean Pascal, the former world champion, and again, that's not, that's a pretty good win, but he won the same way that Dimitry Bivol won against Pascal, but that was, I think, a 4-year difference or a 3-year difference or something like that between the fights. Maybe even more than that. It might have been a 5-year difference between when Eifert fought Pascal and when Bivol fought Pascal. And Pascal was 40 plus at the time he fought Eifert, and had already lost multiple times kind of prior. Obviously, it's still a good name, and it's the best win on his resume by far. You look at his last opponent, and it just really wasn't a very good opponent, who went on to lose multiple times afterwards. Again, he hasn't really got any other notable wins. So really, again, it doesn't really make sense why he has to be the guy to fight for the belt next. The light heavyweight division is interesting. It's not got a clear standout guy, bar Benavidez, who's now up at cruiserweight, and Beterbiev, who could next be in line. But if I'd rather see Callum Smith in this fight against Eifert. Obviously, this was made when Callum Smith was already meant to have a fight, but I feel like there could have been other options and other guys who could have got a title shot over something like an Eifert. Again, it's just not really a fight to which anybody's gonna or have been campaigning for, bar Eifert's fans and team. Again, it's just a random one, really, to see it happen. But Eifert, as a star and as a fighter, he's not awful as a fighter. From what it looks like, he does seem good, and he seems to be able to definitely hold his level. And there is actually certain similarities in their style to, each other, and so that could definitely be interesting how that plays out. And obviously, we saw Hamza Shiraz fight Begic as a kind of like a guy who was in a good position, a German guy in a good position, getting a title shot. That was Begic, who was just completely out of his depth. I don't know if Eifert is going to be shown completely out of his depth. He definitely could be, but I think he is a level above what that kind of Begic level was, if that makes sense. Obviously, it's different weight division and stuff, but if that's the kind of way to look at it, in my opinion, I would say. But to speak about both fighters skill-wise, individually, Bivol, as a fighter, he manages distance, of course, excellently. He can find his range very quickly and very well. He can keep the fight at his distance. I mean, against Beterbiev again, especially in the second fight. He was just so good at just walking Beterbiev onto punches over and over again throughout the whole fight, and just doing that continuously without, slowing down, keeping that momentum on the back foot, and just making sure that he was never in a bad enough spot to be pinned up against the ropes by Benavidez, always knowing which way to turn, how to get out of the bad spots, even though he was on the back foot, and just still keeping a distance when Beterbiev wasn't really wanting to keep that distance, again, was just very impressive. He handles pressure well. He can make sure, like I mentioned, he's never in a bad spot. He's got very good circling movement. He holds his shape well. Again, you never really see him out of that position with his shape or squaring up too much. He's accurate with his work, very accurate. He brings his punches back well, always keeping his hands, especially his backhand high. He keeps his jab out, flowing off of it well, following off of it well. He's well disciplined. Again, very well disciplined style. I would say Eifert's, similar in well disciplined way, and he manages to tempo very well. Again, just the way that he could control that second fight against Beterbiev was just incredibly impressive. And, to be able to do that against a pound for pound level guy who is a power puncher and a risk at every punch in Beterbiev, again, was just brilliant. An amazing performance, really. Negatives about him, you would say he doesn't always necessarily have the power to back you up. Again, he was managing distance and was comfortable on the back foot, just continually moving and punching away, and just the way that he can keep on the move and punching is just a very rare thing, but he just didn't really seem to back up Beterbiev at any point. I don't feel like when he is offensive, he is creating the angles, stepping off to the side, coming in with the hooks. I think he can sometimes neglect bodywork a bit at times, and that was something in which Pascal actually had a bit of success with against Eifert. He can sometimes kind of just be comfortable, just inviting that pressure, backing off. Sometimes he's having a bit of success and then he will just back off instead of following up on that success a bit more. Obviously, that can become, and that can show a sign of discipline where he's not getting overly greedy, but sometimes just a little bit more would be nicer in that way. He has got a different kind of hook technique than what we've used, what we're normally used to with fighters, and even Eifert throws a bit more of a normal to an extent or a common type of hook technique. It's not a bad hook technique, but there's not as much power behind it, and when it's shortened up, it's not as controlled or as snappy or as fast, in my opinion. I don't feel like he fights in close all that comfortably, but again, he can still shorten up his jab well. His head movement isn't actually anything too crazy. Again, he uses so much lateral movement where he just doesn't really. It could help if he adds a bit more head movement, but again, it's not necessarily necessary, if that makes sense. And he hasn't got the strongest guard as well. Punches were still coming through from Beterbiev. Obviously, he's not going to be getting hit by the same level of power from Eifert as what he was from Beterbiev. But again, just in general, I would say he hasn't got the strongest of defensive guards. Again, just relying on his movement to make sure that you can never really plant your feet for long enough to be able to set and get the power punches going against Bivol. I mean, speak about Eifert as a fighter. He can work off his jab well, and he can find his range of it pretty well as well. He's most comfortable, I'd say, at a mid-range. He's willing to go back, and he can often see if you're coming in with a wider kind of swinging shots. Again, Pascal was doing that a lot, and he was seeing that coming for the most part. There was times in which he was getting caught with it later on in the fight, but for the early and mid-rounds, he was kind of seeing it coming and then kind of getting out of the way of it. And again, he was moving well, he was circling well, he was resetting back to the centre very well consistently a lot of the time. He has the kind of high to low feints, which is kind of similar to that Bivol. I feel like you would say that he definitely does watch Bivol's style and tries to replicate it as well as what he can from the looks of things, or at least, from what I can see. He's got strong fundamentals. He doesn't really rush his work. Again, there was times in which Pascal just looked quite exhausted and tired, but you knew then Pascal would come in with a good overhand every so often, so he wasn't really rushing his work. He was still just pinning away shots. He was still throwing when he had him on the ropes, but he wasn't, like I say, doing anything too much. He stays consistent with his work, and again, I would say he has a more common hook technique, which in close could actually work out a little bit better possibly for him at times if it does get in close to fight at any point. Negatives about him, I'd say he's not as accurate. He's got an open guard when he's throwing. He keeps his hands quite low when he's throwing. So again, Pascal at times was definitely able to land that overhand and it would land it clean. He's not got as strong of a jab, and I just feel like he does struggle to punch through the guard, especially when he's following up on punches as well. There's times in which he is happy just kind of letting punches bounce off the guard, whereas I feel even if you have a strong guard and you're fighting against Bivol, he'll find a way to get his punches through. He doesn't necessarily make you pay if you miss, as much as the counters and the speed of Bivol will do that. If you miss against him, he will then follow back straight instantly with punches, whereas Eifert is often kind of getting too far out of range when you miss to then be able to follow up with anything, or just doesn't really follow up with it. He's very willing to go on the back foot, even if he is in a good spot. I feel like Bivol is willing to invite that pressure, but he will then stand his ground if he is, welcome to, and if the fighter does start to back up. Whereas Eifert, if you throw one punch, he'll just allow you to have the entire ring to just be able to get back into it again. If you lead off your jab and then come and follow in after that, then again, with a bigger punch, you will probably land on him. Again, if you go low to high, it often does work on him, but again, we'll see how low to high the punches of Bivol are if he starts to throw to the body more. I don't feel like he throws on the back foot. He moves well on the back foot, Eifert, but he's not really throwing that much on the back foot. His head movement, again, is limited as well. And yeah, who do I think is going to win this fight? I think that Dmitry Bivol is going to win via TKO in round 10. I'm pretty sure. Well, Eifert has gone the 12-round distance, I think, once in his career, but Bivol obviously has on multiple occasions. And if Bivol is still at his best and hasn't been affected too much by the time off or the wars or his injury, I think he will be a level above. I think the speed of him will be able to do all too much for Eifert. Again, the speed, the counters. If Eifert throws a jab, tries to follow up off it, then Bivol will be able to switch that and catch him with a punch pretty comfortably. I think the open guard of Eifert will just not play into his favour at all. I feel like Eifert will be able to maybe work behind the jab a bit, but I think Bivol is just so accurate, so precise, and can get his punches through no matter what. I think it will be a welcome stylistic change for Bivol to be able to fight somebody he's not going to be putting on the same level of pressure throughout the entirety of the fight, and it might catch him off guard because he has been, so prepared for that for his past two fights. But you would imagine it would be a pretty comfortable performance where he can even turn things up later on into the fight and then be able to get that late stoppage, which is again my prediction for this fight. And then who he can go on to fight next? I mean, I've listed the three names. Beterbiev again is the fight in which I want to see next, and is a fight in which I'm sure everybody will be happy to see again. Benavidez, of course, a huge name, been able to develop and really show himself as a pound-for-pound talent since Bivol's had this time off over the last year. I'm sure Benavidez is actually happy that he's had that time off for him to be able to then get into the spotlight a bit more. Benavidez or Callum Smith, if the WBO do order the belt and Dimitry Bivol doesn't want to vacate his WBO belt, then the Callum Smith fight will happen. If Smith can get paid off to then kind of go around that, if His Excellency gets involved or Matchroom are willing to do that, then they can do that. But again, I just don't know what's happening with the promotional side of things, but I would imagine if they've got a big fight for Dmitry Bivol, if he wins this one well, they will then pay off Smith to then move it aside, step aside, to then go down and keep the WBO belt. You'd like to hope so, or of course Bivol will have to vacate the belt, and if he doesn't want to fight Smith, for his mandatory. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.